The moment Victoria Reed's hand struck 8-year-old Marcus Washington's cheek, the entire first-class cabin froze. But the shock wasn't just about the assault. It was about the identity of the child's father, Solomon Washington, America's first black trillionaire. His quiet rage was about to dismantle not just one career, but an entire corporate structure. How could one impulsive slap reveal a conspiracy that would shake the American corporate world to its core? Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from. If you believe in standing up against injustice and exposing prejudice, smash that like button and subscribe for more eye-opening true stories that rarely make mainstream news. The air in the Sky Blue Airlines first-class cabin was crisp and sterile, cutting through the humid summer heat of New York as the plane prepared for a cross-country flight to Los Angeles. Solomon Washington adjusted his bespoke Italian suit. He occasionally flew commercial, despite owning a private jet fleet, a habit he maintained to stay connected. Beside him, 8-year-old Marcus bounced excitedly, clutching his favorite action figure. His sister, 12-year-old Zara, walked with the confident poise she inherited from her father. At the aircraft door, flight attendant Victoria Reed's professional welcoming smile instantly vanished. Her eyes narrowed, scanning their designer clothes with unconcealed suspicion. Victoria, a woman whose 20-year career was built on maintaining the rigid social order of first class, judged people in an instant. Economy boarding is from the rear entrance, she stated sharply. Solomon calmly held up 3 first-class boarding passes. Victoria snatched them, examining them as if they were forgeries. She grudgingly stepped aside with a tight-lipped, "Very well," muttering, "They'll let anyone up here with points these days." As the Washingtons made their way to their seats, Solomon noted the stark contrast in treatment. A less refined white family was greeted warmly by Victoria, offered pre-flight champagne, and had their bags expertly stowed. Solomon, who'd built his empire by noticing patterns others missed, began mentally documenting each subtle slight. Money bought access, but it couldn't buy respect from those who refused to see past his skin color. During pre-takeoff service, Victoria intentionally avoided their row. When she finally approached, she addressed the white businessman across the aisle first. "Anything to drink?" she asked flatly, finally turning to the Washingtons. "Apple juice, please," Marcus requested politely. Victoria's eyes rolled slightly. She turned to another flight attendant and said loudly, "These people always cause extra work. Watch them ask for the entire beverage cart." Solomon maintained his dignity, his face impassive despite the burning indignation. When Victoria returned, she carelessly thrust the drink toward Marcus. The plastic cup tipped, spilling cold water across Solomon's lap and onto his expensive suit. "Oh," Victoria said without a hint of apology. "Your son should be more careful when grabbing things." Solomon calmly pressed the call button. When lead flight attendant Michael Pierce arrived, Michael sided instantly with Victoria, implying Solomon was being a bit sensitive. Solomon recognized the unified front. He pulled out his phone and began typing notes, names, times, and actions. This subtle act caused both flight attendants to exchange nervous glances before retreating to the galley. As the plane climbed through turbulent air, little Marcus whimpered softly, pressing his hands against his ears, genuine pain from the pressure changes affecting his sensitive eardrums. Before Solomon could give him the prescribed eardrops, Victoria's sharp voice cut through the cabin. "That child needs to stop making a scene. This is first class, not a playground." The hypocrisy was public and undeniable. A white family across the aisle had a toddler crying louder, and Victoria was already there, cooing sympathetically and offering warm towels and candy. Zara, wise beyond her 12 years, stood up and addressed Victoria politely. "Excuse me, ma'am. My brother has a medical condition. He's not being disruptive on purpose." Victoria's face contorted with anger at being challenged by a child. She placed her hand firmly on Zara's shoulder and pushed her roughly back into her seat. "Your kind need to learn your place," she hissed low enough for only the family to hear. "If you can't control your children, perhaps you shouldn't bring them into adult spaces." Solomon felt his heart pound with controlled rage. He discreetly positioned his phone to record the escalating situation. Meanwhile, one elderly white woman seated nearby, Beverly Matthews, a retired principal, intervened. "Young lady, I believe your behavior toward these children is completely inappropriate. I'd like to speak to your supervisor." Victoria's professional mask slipped entirely. "Ma'am, I'll be serving your section last now since you want to involve yourself in matters that don't concern you. The threat expanded the circle of her targeted mistreatment. When Marcus urgently needed the restroom, Victoria ignored the call button for 10 minutes. She finally stomped over and refused permission, citing the illuminated seatbelt sign. Yet, not 30 seconds later, a white boy Marcus's age stood up and headed to the bathroom. Victoria smiled warmly at him as he passed. Solomon stood up, his imposing 6'3" frame commanding attention. My son will be using the restroom now just like that child is. I'm also going to need your full name and employee ID number. Victoria, clutching her phone, sneered. Keep this up and I'll make sure security meets the plane. We don't tolerate disruptive passengers regardless of who they think they are. 2 hours into the flight, during meal service, the subtle attacks became outright malice. The Washington family was served 20 minutes late. Victoria announced they were out of the beef option, despite having served it to the previous passenger. Marcus's chicken was visibly cold. Zara's meal was missing components. Marcus looked at his cold plate and then at the dessert cart. "Excuse me," he said in his small voice. "I think my dessert is missing. Are you calling me a liar?" Victoria's voice rose sharply. "Or are you just trying to get free food?" Marcus, fighting back tears, hesitantly reached toward his father's untouched cake, seeking comfort. Victoria's hand shot out like a viper, slapping Marcus's small fingers with enough force to leave an angry red mark across his knuckles. "Don't touch what isn't yours," she hissed. The cabin fell silent. Marcus whispered, "You hurt me," a single tear escaping. At that simple, undeniable statement of fact, something in Victoria snapped. Her hand lashed out again, this time striking Marcus across his cheek with an audible crack that echoed through the silent cabin. "Don't you dare accuse me of anything." "You spoiled brat," she spat. "Solomon Washington," who had faced a lifetime of discrimination, had always responded with strategic precision, but he had never witnessed someone physically assault his child. With a deliberate calm that belied the fury coursing through him, Solomon pulled out his phone. "Gregory." Solomon spoke quietly into the phone, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face. "It's Solomon. I'm on Sky Blue Flight 1857. I need you to contact Chairman Rivera immediately. A flight attendant named Victoria Reed just physically assaulted Marcus twice. I have it on video." Victoria scoffed, believing he was bluffing. "Sir, you aren't allowed to make calls during flight. We don't appreciate passengers trying to name-drop or make threats." Solomon simply held her gaze. Then to Victoria, he added quietly, "You have no idea what you've just done." Victoria rolled her eyes. She had no way of knowing that Solomon Washington owned 22% of Sky Blue Airlines' parent company, or that Chairman Rivera was on his speed dial. Exactly 22 minutes after Solomon's call, the plane's intercom crackled with the captain's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just received instructions to divert to Denver International Airport for an unscheduled landing, due to an administrative matter." Victoria stormed out of the galley, her face flushed but her stance defiant. "I hope you're happy," she hissed at Solomon, "inconveniencing everyone with your complaints. The only person responsible for this situation is you, Ms. Reed." Victoria sneered, loud enough for surrounding passengers to hear. "You people always think you're being targeted. Maybe if you taught your children some manners instead of playing the race card every time someone corrects their behavior, we wouldn't be in this situation." Solomon finally lowered his phone slightly. "I'm currently speaking with Chairman Rivera of Sky Blue Airlines and Mr. Thornton, your CEO. They're both on the line and have been listening to this entire interaction. Would you like to speak with them?" Victoria laughed derisively. "Right, and I'm on the phone with the president." As if on cue, every one of the crew phones in the galley began ringing simultaneously. Michael reluctantly answered one, his face draining of color. He gestured frantically for Victoria to join him. She snatched the phone, listening for just a few seconds before responding loudly. "That's not what happened at all. They're lying. That child was being disruptive and I simply—" She stopped, listening again, her knuckles whitening around the phone. "But you can't just hello." As the plane touched down in Denver, the passengers were startled to see airline executives and airport security waiting on the tarmac. When the lead executive, Diane Morales, vice president of flight operations, stepped aboard, Victoria stepped forward with a victorious smile. "Thank goodness you're here. This passenger has been harassing me and making false accusations. I need him removed from the flight immediately." Morales didn't even glance at Solomon. Ms. Reed, along with the rest of this cabin crew, is being removed from duty effective immediately pending investigation. Morales announced loud enough for all passengers to hear, as security officers escorted a shouting, completely derailed Victoria from the aircraft, her professional facade utterly shattered. Passengers watched in stunned silence. Solomon Washington watched with measured satisfaction. But as the plane refueled, Victoria broke away from her escort and sprinted toward the windows overlooking the aircraft. Her face contorted with rage. She pounded on the glass, pointing at Solomon and shouting racial slurs and threats. Airport security quickly restrained her, but not before dozens of passengers had captured her tirade on their phones. Solomon Washington, America's first black trillionaire, knew this was just the beginning. Victoria's parting threat about powerful friends hadn't been the desperate bluff of a terminated employee. It was a warning he would soon discover was all too real. As Sky Blue Flight 1857 touched down at Los Angeles International Airport, news crews were already assembled. Solomon guided his children through the terminal, his dignified response, "My children have been through enough today. I have no comment at this time except to say that actions have consequences," becoming the defining soundbite. Meanwhile, at another part of the airport, Victoria Reed, still in her uniform, was being formally processed for suspension. "This is a witch hunt," she shrieked at the HR representative. "I'm suspended because some rich guy played the race card." As she and her lawyer, James Whitfield, exited, Victoria spotted Solomon's limousine pulling away. In a final, unhinged act, she broke free and sprinted across the pickup lanes, pounding on the limousine's window. "You think you can ruin me? You people are all the same, using your money and playing victims." She screamed racial slurs, all of which Solomon calmly captured on his phone. The damage was complete. The immediate response from Sky Blue was appropriate, but Solomon's instincts, the ones that built his empire, told him a single flight attendant wasn't the root cause. Victoria's extreme confidence in her parting threat were key data points. Solomon Washington cradled Marcus close, whispering reassurances. He had won the battle in the cabin, but the war for accountability was about to begin. The assault on his son was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a larger systemic disease, and Victoria's powerful unseen friends were about to reveal themselves. A trillionaire's meticulous strategy was now needed to dismantle a corporate conspiracy that reached the highest echelons of American business. The story is far from over. Victoria Reed, now terminated, is not alone. Her threats about powerful friends were real. And the evidence Solomon Washington is about to uncover will expose a deep network of corporate rot. Will Solomon's wealth and strategic genius be enough to fight a conspiracy that includes CEOs, board members, and maybe even corrupted officials? Comment accountability. If you believe Solomon must use his power to expose the entire system, hit that like button and subscribe for part 2, where the first black trillionaire unleashes his full strategic arsenal. By nightfall, Victoria Reed's airport tirade, raw, unvarnished, and explicitly racist, was trending with millions of views. Her lawyer's carefully crafted defense was rendered completely ineffective. At Sky Blue Airlines at SkyBL headquarters, CEO Richard Thornton looked grim as he addressed the emergency board meeting. He reported the swift termination of Victoria Reed, and controversially, the entire cabin crew that failed to intervene. They witnessed a child being racially abused and physically assaulted and did nothing. "That's not who we are as a company," Thornton declared. What Thornton didn't share was the chilling effectiveness of Solomon Washington's earlier call, where the trillionaire simply asked, "Does Sky Blue consider child abuse and racial discrimination part of its brand identity?" But as the Washingtons arrived at their sprawling Bear estate, Solomon received an update. A highly organized social media campaign was forming around Victoria Reed. This wasn't organic. This was coordinated. By the following morning, the viral counter-narrative was fully deployed. Victoria Reed, freshly coiffed and tearful, appeared on national news. "I have devoted my life to customer service," she sobbed, claiming Solomon had used his wealth and influence to have her fired without due process. She painted herself as a single mother targeted by cancel culture. The narrative omitted the fact that videos clearly showed Marcus Washington seated quietly when Victoria struck him. Within hours, the hashtag #StandWithVictoria trended. A legal defense fund collected over $100,000 in its first day, amplified by bot networks. The counterattack escalated. Washington Innovation suddenly lost a $50 million government contract. Then, the psychological warfare began. At the exclusive Alpine Academy, where Marcus attended school, Solomon expected support. Instead, headmaster Dr. Ellison was distant, offering only perfunctory concern. Zara called her father, her voice tight with rage. "Dad, the parents are saying horrible things to Marcus." Solomon arrived to find his son weeping silently. Dr. Ellison shifted uncomfortably. "Several of our most prominent families believe the media coverage has been unfair to Ms. Reed. They're calling Marcus a liar. Are you suggesting my children are no longer welcome at Alpine Academy?" Solomon asked quietly. Dr. Ellison's expression confirmed it. The school was choosing to protect the wealthy white families from the uncomfortable reality of racism, rather than protect the black children actually experiencing it. As the Washingtons left the school, reporters had somehow gathered, shouting precisely targeted questions aligned with Victoria Reed's narrative. "Did you fabricate the assault claims? Did you threaten to buy Sky Blue?" Solomon's security chief confirmed his suspicions. Victoria Reed's campaign was being amplified by accounts connected to 3 major corporations that competed directly with Washington Innovations. Furthermore, her lawyer, James Whitfield of Whitfield and Associates, simultaneously represented these rivals. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't about a flight attendant. It was about making an example of Solomon Washington. Meanwhile, in the mahogany-paneled conference room of Whitfield and Associates, Victoria Reed, looking out of place despite her new designer outfit, sat nervously. James Whitfield, adjusting his gold cufflinks, announced the $40 million wrongful termination suit against Sky Blue, positioning Reed as the victim of woke culture. What Victoria missed was the meaningful glance exchanged between Whitfield and Charlene Davenport, a sharply dressed woman whose family name adorned city buildings, and who were major shareholders in Pinnacle Technologies, Solomon's chief rival. "Our polling shows significant traction with the reverse racism angle," the PR director reported. "We've got 3 senators already making statements." Solomon watched the effective narrative shift with analytical detachment. "They're trying to isolate us socially and economically," he concluded. "But they've made 3 critical errors." He initiated his comprehensive counter-strategy. First, his chief technology officer activated protocol verification. Authenticated, time-stamped, multi-angle video of the entire flight, forensically certified, lit up every major social media platform, leaving no room for claims of deceptive editing. Second, his media company released a special report detailing Victoria Reed's history of disproportionate customer complaints from passengers of color, a pattern repeatedly overlooked by Sky Blue management. Third and most effective, his team traced the primary funding sources behind Victoria's legal defense fund to shell companies ultimately controlled by the Davenport family and their associates. Within hours, financial news outlets published detailed reports. Flight attendants' grassroots support revealed as AstroTurf campaign funded by tech rivals family. The narrative shifted dramatically. What was once seen as a simple employment dispute was now revealed as a sophisticated attempt by powerful interests to weaponize racism for corporate advantage. The next morning, the conspiracy was undeniably exposed when an anonymous source leaked emails between Whitfield and Charlene Davenport, discussing the need to make an example of Washington and put him back in his place after he had forgotten who really runs things. The racial undertones were unmistakable, but the coordinated bullying campaign moved beyond the adults to target an 8-year-old child already suffering from trauma. Marcus, back at home, showed his father cruel messages from classmates clearly parroting their parents' language. For the first time since the incident began, Solomon's carefully maintained composure cracked. Then the final crucial clue. Solomon's security chief confirmed. "Sir, we've traced the source of the emails attacking Marcus. They're coming from inside Alpine Academy's administration building." The realization dawned. This wasn't about Victoria Reed or corporate rivalry. The Davenports and their allies were willing to psychologically torture a child to maintain their position at the top of America's social and economic hierarchy. Solomon Washington stood in his command center, now focused on the systemic rot. His head of intelligence, Amara Okafor, highlighted Victoria Reed's employment pattern. 17 previous complaints of discrimination by passengers of color, all routed to the same HR manager, Walter Davenport Sr., Charlene's uncle. The family had protected her for decades. Troubling connections mounted. Whitfield specialized in defending corporations against racial bias claims, meticulously destroying plaintiffs' credibility before trial. And his firm received millions in consulting fees from Pinnacle Technologies CEO, Richard Davenport. The attacks became financial. 3 of Washington Innovation's pending patents were flagged for extended review, a bureaucratic delay tactic. Then a coordinated short attack on their stock. This was mobilization on a scale that showed America's power structure was willing to risk billions to put a black trillionaire in his place for challenging racism. The final, sophisticated move. Solomon's private server was breached. Forged emails appeared on right-wing news sites, purporting to show Solomon planning to manufacture a discrimination incident to damage Sky Blue. Richard Thornton, Sky Blue's CEO, called Solomon, sounding frightened. "Solomon, the board is meeting tomorrow to reconsider Reed's termination. There's enormous pressure to characterize this as a misunderstanding and offer her job back. You have video of her slapping my child, Richard." "I know, but some board members are suggesting the video doesn't show the full context, that maybe Marcus did something to provoke her." The message was clear. The system was rewriting reality, determined to make the Washington family the aggressors, to establish that even with a $1 trillion fortune, a black man challenging racism would be broken. But they had chosen the wrong opponent. Solomon Washington, his protective fury now fully awakened, initiated the next phase. A comprehensive investigation into how deep this network of corruption truly extended. The plot has thickened into a vast corporate conspiracy. Solomon Washington is facing not just a racist flight attendant, but a powerful interconnected network of corporate rivals and establishment figures willing to sacrifice an innocent child's well-being to protect their entrenched privilege. Can a single trillionaire dismantle a system built by generations of elite power? Will the truth about the Davenports and Pinnacle Technologies finally come to light? The pressure on Solomon Washington's corporate board was immense. Later that day, in an emergency meeting, several longtime members suggested he focus on business and consider a private settlement to make this go away. "We're concerned about shareholder value," one explained, the thinly veiled pressure a familiar corporate maneuver. "These distractions are causing material harm to the company." Solomon listened, his eyes calm but lethal. "Let me be very clear," he finally responded. "I built this company from nothing. I own controlling interest, and I will burn it to the ground myself before I teach my children that they should accept racial abuse to protect white comfort or corporate profits." The room fell silent, the words hitting the carefully sanitized corporate environment like a shockwave. As the meeting concluded, Solomon received a call from Victoria Reed, clearly coached. Her offer was audacious. She would drop her $40 million lawsuit if Solomon publicly apologized for mischaracterizing the incident and admitted to using his influence inappropriately. Solomon ended the call without responding. The request confirmed the true goal: to force a powerful black man into public deference to a white woman, even when she was demonstrably wrong. The symbolic value of such an apology to those who resented his success would be immeasurable. That evening, Solomon checked on Marcus. He found his son staring blankly at the ceiling, unresponsive. The child psychiatrist confirmed the combined trauma had pushed Marcus into an anxiety state, requiring immediate intervention. Something in Solomon shifted. He had spent his career working within the system. Now, watching his traumatized child, he recognized the naivety of that belief. No amount of wealth could protect his family from the fundamental injustices embedded in American society. As he sat beside Marcus's bed, Solomon made a decision. This wasn't about one flight attendant. It was about exposing the entire network of power and privilege that had mobilized to protect her, because they feared the precedent of a black man successfully demanding justice. He had the resources to expose it all. Little did Solomon know, the evidence that would blow the entire conspiracy wide open was about to come from the most unexpected source imaginable. Solomon Washington's private phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He answered. "Mr. Washington, this is Beverly Matthews." Solomon straightened immediately. The kind older woman who had spoken up on the flight. "I always record my flights," Beverly explained hesitantly. "The entire flight clear as day, including what that woman said when she thought no one could hear her. Premeditated intent." This audio would destroy Victoria Reed's defense. Solomon immediately arranged for Beverly's grandson, Adam, to deliver the recording. But someone was monitoring Solomon's calls. At 2:17 a.m., Beverly Matthews's home was broken into. Nothing was taken except her smartphone and laptop. The burglars were professional, leaving no traces. The next morning, Adam called from the hospital. "They hurt her, Mr. Washington. She tried to stop them from taking her phone and they pushed her down the stairs. She's in critical condition." The attack on an elderly woman crossed a line. Solomon immediately secured Beverly's medical care and sent his team to assist Adam. The original recording was gone, but Adam managed to access Beverly's cloud backup. His face quickly changed from hope to concern. "Her password isn't working." Solomon's cybersecurity chief confirmed the worst. The account had been compromised. Files deleted. The targeted attack meant Solomon's own communications were compromised at a level his world-class security team hadn't detected. Solomon moved his children to a secure location and implemented emergency protocols. His private investigator then uncovered the smoking gun. Victoria Reed's brother, Lawrence Reed, was a senior vice president at Davenport Digital, the cyber warfare division of Pinnacle Technologies. Pinnacle was Solomon's main competitor, controlled by the Davenport family, the same family orchestrating the school attacks and funding Victoria's defense. Lawrence Reed's position explained the nation-state level hacking and media manipulation. Solomon realized the depth of the plan. They don't just fight the legal battle, they destroy anyone who challenges them. He built his team to contact previous victims of Whitfield's tactics. As he contemplated his next move, Zara knocked on his office door. "Dad," she said without preamble. "Marcus watch. The one Grandma gave him for his birthday. It has that emergency recording feature that activates when heart rate spikes." The child's smartwatch had gone unnoticed by the sophisticated attackers. Solomon retrieved the device. The recording was intact, capturing Victoria's voice before the slap, discussing with another crew member how they would make sure these people know their place. It was damning. Solomon Washington entered the Washington Innovations boardroom, where several members, compromised by the conspiracy, were prepared to vote him out. Thomas Harrington, previously a strong supporter, was now leading the effort to remove him. "Before we vote," Solomon said smoothly, "I'd like to present new evidence." He connected his phone to the display, prepared to play Marcus's watch recording, only to find the connection failing repeatedly. Sabotage. As the board prepared to vote, the doors burst open. Marcus Washington walked in, holding up his smartwatch. "Dad, I recorded it too," he said with surprising determination. "Not just on the plane. Yesterday too, when Mr. Harrington was talking to the scary lawyer man about making you leave your company." Harrington's face drained of color. "That's ridiculous. The boy is obviously confused." Marcus, finding courage despite his trauma, connected the watch to the display himself. The recording was crystal clear. Harrington's voice was unmistakable, speaking with James Whitfield. "Washington is too powerful. He's forgotten his place. The board vote is arranged. He'll be out by noon tomorrow." Whitfield's response: "Good. Once he's isolated, we move to phase 2. The Davenports are prepared to acquire controlling interest at the depressed valuation. The consortium agrees this is necessary." Victoria Reed was just the beginning. But the next section transformed the conspiracy into explicit malice. "The black billionaire problem," Harrington said, "is that they don't understand the natural order. Washington needs to learn there are consequences for challenging the system that made America great." The boardroom erupted. The board meeting instantly transformed into an emergency session, addressing Harrington's breach of fiduciary duty. As security escorted the disgraced board member from the building, Solomon's phone lit up with an urgent alert. Victoria Reed was attempting to flee the country on a private jet, registered to Davenport Holdings. Simultaneously, their network reported a scorched earth contingency plan, massive data transfers and deletion attempts across Davenport systems. "They're trying to destroy the evidence," Solomon smiled. "Let them try. We've been running Shadow Protocol since Beverly's home was invaded. Shadow Protocol, Solomon's proprietary physically disconnected backup system, was impervious to the attack. Federal authorities acting on Solomon's evidence raided offices connected to Whitfield's firm and Davenport subsidiary companies, catching key conspirators destroying evidence. Victoria Reed, apprehended at the airport, quickly offered immunity in exchange for telling everything about the Davenports and Whitfield, but Solomon was firm, no deals. Everyone involved should face the full consequences of their actions. She wasn't forced to strike my child. That was her choice. Solomon Washington returned home. Marcus was finally playing video games with a semblance of his former enthusiasm. Zara sat nearby, reading legal briefs with intense focus. "Is it over, Dad?" Marcus asked. Solomon considered the question. The immediate danger had passed. The conspiracy was exposed, but the system that created the Davenports that protected Victoria Reed for 20 years remained. "The immediate fight is over, son," Solomon said, kneeling beside him. "The law will deal with them. But the fight to change the natural order? That is a lifetime's work. It's why we build, why we achieve, and why we will never be silent." The next day, Sky Blue Airlines announced the immediate resignation of the chairman, the CEO, and several key board members. Solomon Washington stepped in as interim chairman, initiating a company-wide cultural and structural overhaul. Pinnacle Technologies' stock plummeted, the Davenport family facing civil lawsuits from Solomon and a looming federal investigation. Beverly Matthews, recovering in the hospital, received a surprise visit, a large check and a note from Solomon. Heroes deserve better than silence. Solomon Washington had gone into the system to succeed. He came out deciding to dismantle it. His children, Marcus and Zara, had not only witnessed the worst of discrimination but the most strategic, powerful response possible. They learned that the greatest wealth is not money, but the courage to demand justice when the system is rigged against you. The power structures tried to teach Solomon Washington a lesson. Instead, he taught them a lesson in accountability. The final chapter of this saga is not about a flight attendant. It's about a trillionaire using his strategic genius to fight for the future of his children and the future of justice itself. If you were inspired by Solomon's refusal to back down, smash that like button, subscribe for more epic stories of people who use their power to change the world, and let us know what you would have done if you were in the boardroom. The conspiracy was collapsing, its key members facing both civil and criminal charges. But the underlying issues, the entrenched power structures that viewed black success as a threat to be neutralized, those remained. "The worst is over," Solomon answered his children truthfully. "But the real work is just beginning." He knew the incident had provided a unique, painful window into how power operated in America, revealing a system that reflexively mobilized to protect white privilege whenever it was challenged. As the coalition assembled against Washington rapidly disintegrated, Solomon received an update. Michael Pierce, the lead flight attendant, was offering to testify against the larger conspiracy in exchange for leniency. Solomon began formulating not just his legal strategy, but his vision for fundamental change. He had never been one to waste an opportunity, and the chance to dismantle systemic discrimination at its source was unprecedented. The federal courthouse buzzed with unprecedented security. Victoria Reed, reduced to a minor player, hurried up the steps. Gone was her polished defiance, replaced by the dawning realization that the powerful interests who had promised to protect her were now scrambling to save themselves. Inside, Solomon Washington conferred with federal prosecutors. The Davenport family offered to settle all claims and provide compensatory damages if Solomon agreed to sealed records. Solomon shook his head. No private settlements, no sealed records. The public deserves to know exactly how these systems operate. His refusal to accept confidential settlements had become the cornerstone of his strategy. Victoria Reed's new legal team offered her full testimony for immunity, but Judge Rosario denied the request. "Ms. Reed," the judge stated firmly, "your willing participation in discrimination and physical assault of a minor disqualifies you from consideration for immunity. You were an enthusiastic participant, not a victim." Victoria slumped as the reality of her position finally sank in. Outside, James Whitfield attempted an impromptu press conference to claim he was misled, but federal agents chose that precise moment to serve him with additional warrants. His expression of shock became an iconic image of the scandal. During a recess, Solomon received an urgent call. Beverly Matthews had regained consciousness and insisted on providing formal testimony. Against medical advice, the elderly woman's face appeared on the courtroom screens via secure video link. "I may be old," Beverly began, her voice weak but resolute, "but I was raised to know right from wrong. What that woman did to that child was wrong. What those people did afterward, trying to blame the victim, was wrong. I'm here because somebody needs to say that out loud." Her testimony, delivered with moral clarity that cut through the legal complexities, was the emotional core of the case. Victoria Reed, who had maintained a facade of indignant victimhood, finally broke down. Beverly's testimony concluded, but the battle was not over. Solomon's security chief passed him an urgent note. Massive cyber attack in progress against all Washington companies. The attack signature was new, sophisticated, and routing through a Davenport subsidiary. "Activate Contingency Omega," Solomon instructed. Contingency Omega, Solomon's final defensive measure, was a complete mirror of all Washington. Enterprise data maintained on isolated quantum-encrypted servers. Physically disconnected from any attackable network, the multi-billion-dollar system developed as a paranoid precaution was now priceless. "All systems preserved, sir," came the confirmation. "Forensics indicates government-grade tools being deployed for private purposes. Forward everything to the FBI's Cybercrime Division." Back in the courtroom, Michael Pierce began his testimony, detailing the premeditation of the discrimination. He described Victoria's call the night before, explaining that they needed to be put in their place. As the hearings concluded, the conspiracy was collapsing. Victoria Reed, abandoned and exposed, faced inevitable consequences. The Davenport family, seeing their carefully constructed defenses crumbling, were apprehended at the airport attempting to flee the country. The scene became an indelible image in the unfolding drama. 6 months later, the federal courthouse was packed for the sentencing hearings. Beverly Matthews, now recovered, sat beside Solomon and his children. Judge Rosario sentenced Victoria Reed to 4 years in federal prison, followed by supervised release and 2,000 hours of community service specifically promoting racial justice and children's welfare. Solomon felt no satisfaction, only a sense that accountability was the beginning of a much longer journey. Outside the courthouse, Solomon unveiled the Washington Accountability Project, a billion-dollar commitment to combating systemic discrimination. "Today isn't about punishment," he declared. "It's about transformation. What happened to my family revealed something broken in our systems, not just one flight attendant's bias, but how power mobilizes to protect privilege when challenged." 3 weeks later, Solomon Washington walked into the executive offices of Sky Blue Airlines. The struggling company had been devastated by the scandal. He placed a document on the table. "This is confirmation of my investment firm's acquisition of controlling interest in Sky Blue Airlines, completed this morning. I'm not here for revenge," he stated. "I'm here because this company now has an opportunity to become a model for transformation." Over the following months, Sky Blue implemented the most comprehensive anti-discrimination protocols in the airline industry. Solomon, working with his recovered son, unveiled the Young Traveler's Voice system, allowing children to easily and securely report mistreatment during flights, an innovation eventually adopted by airlines worldwide. Marcus, now 9, spoke at the launch. "Sometimes grown-ups don't believe kids when we tell them something bad happened. This helps make sure we're heard." Zara, now 13, expanded her analysis into a comprehensive research project, mapping how discrimination complaints were traditionally handled across different industries. Beverly Matthews, the unexpected icon of moral courage, used her platform to speak about the responsibility of bystanders. "You don't have to be powerful to stand up for what's right. You just have to be present and willing," she often told audiences. 1 year after the initial incident, Solomon stood at his office window. Sky Blue Airlines was now leading the industry in equity initiatives. The Washington Accountability Project was tackling systemic issues in healthcare, education, and housing. He watched a new Sky Blue advertisement, a diverse group of flight attendants, with the tagline, "Everyone belongs in the sky." Solomon knew the work was far from complete, but watching his children grow into their purpose and witness, he felt something he had rarely permitted himself: genuine hope. The world, while flawed, had been nudged toward accountability by their refusal to accept injustice. In the distance, a sky-blue airliner climbed into the evening sky, carrying not just passengers, but the possibility of a more just future taking flight. The story of the Washington family teaches us that true power lies not in wealth, but in moral clarity and strategic action. Solomon's refusal to accept injustice transformed a personal stand into a catalyst for systemic reform. We learned that witnesses to injustice like Beverly Matthews have a crucial role. Silence perpetuates discrimination. Speaking up can spark transformation. What would you have done if you witnessed what Beverly Matthews saw on that flight? Would you have spoken up or remained silent like most passengers? Comment below with Furnace Courage if you believe in standing up against injustice even when it's difficult. If you believe in creating a world where everyone is treated with dignity, hit that subscribe button and like this video to help spread this important message. Thank you for listening to this story of courage, accountability, and transformation. Real change begins with refusing to accept injustice.